Thank you for downloading my Trail Map to Teeming. This is a 9-step evolutionary journey for leaders who are ready to eat change for breakfast and scale nature's way. An MBA or an economics degree might not actually require a single biology class. Meanwhile, every solution seems to just create some bigger problem down the road and limit our options for dealing with it. But as COVID reminded us, we are living things with the same kinds of needs and challenges that every other living thing faces. Our solutions must be rooted in this biological reality because nothing makes sense otherwise. But living things like us have a powerful ace up our sleeve. The reality is we have what we need, an inherent adaptive quality and ability to create conditions conducive to life for our descendants and the web of life they will depend on. Coral reefs are sequestering carbon with every bit of reef that they build. These termites maintain their mounds within a single degree Celsius day and night all season long, and they do it without a feat that takes 20% of the world's global energy needs, and they do it without meetings or targets or managers. Australian surfer Jay Harmon observed the way that waves and seashells spiraled, and he cast a whirlpool, froze it, and cast it into an impeller. And that fan is now 85% more effective than conventional fans. Fans use 22% of global energy, so this is a major game-changing innovation. By simply observing these flows and mimicking them, he was able to unlock this incredible potential. And the best engineers in the world wouldn't even listen to him. How is it possible that they missed this? But a better question might be, what else are we leaving on the table? What would it take to unleash this kind of potential in everything we do, in our organizations and communities and lives? I'm Dr. Tamsin Woolley-Barker. I'm an evolutionary biologist known for my research on baboon social evolution. And I'm also the author of Teeming, How Nature's Oldest Teams Adapt and Thrive, which is a key reference in the emerging field of biomimicry, innovation inspired by nature. So that book, Teeming, described the inherent potential that all living things have. And it especially looked at ants and honeybees and the way they grow their teeming organizations. My new book is The Teeming Transformation. If you're an entrepreneur or a leader of teams, then I think you're gonna love The Teeming Transformation. Powerful frameworks and principles that are designed to generate transformative insights that can help you change the game as well. They have from me and for the many leaders and organizations that I've had the pleasure of working with. So let's hit the trail with these essential transitions to unlock our own teeming transformation. Transition 1. I was 8th grade when I came across a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. It was a drawing book, but I was really fascinated by her descriptions of brain research on stroke victims. I decided to do an experiment for the school science fair. I gave the class an image and asked half of them to draw it and the other half to turn it upside down before they did. Then I had the teachers rank them for accuracy. And just as she had described, the upside down drawings were far better. Why was that? Well, it turns out when you're asked to draw something like, say, a man in a chair, your quick wit says, I know what that is, and draws the idea of a man in a chair. It might look kind of cartoonish and people might laugh, and next time you're asked to draw something, you might say, oh, I can't draw. But in reality, you never actually looked at the picture. Turning that picture upside down stuns your quick wit into silence for a second, so you can actually see what's there. An unquestioned assumption underlies all our designs. It's a collective blind spot that prevents us from even seeing the potential that's in front of us. And it's the idea that life works the same way as a machine. It can be optimized, there's one good answer, but life isn't like that. It doesn't work like a machine. And if you turn the picture upside down, you'll see the truth. that life is open-ended and full of possibility. I call it teeming. It's this inherent self-organizing, adaptive potential that every living thing possesses. And that brings us to transition number 2. So I was living in a tent in Ethiopia studying these wild baboons. There were 2 very different kinds, a perfect natural experiment. The Anubis baboons were kind of like other African baboons. They sleep together in trees near a water source and forage together during the day as a loose troop. Females stay with their relatives and they pretty much inherit their mother's social status, whereas the males leave when they reach adolescence, and they're pretty much resigned to having to fight for the best mates and food. Their social status is earned, and it matters a lot to them. The other kind of baboon, this desert hamadryas, was very different. A regal leader male led a small group of females and infants up and down the rocky cliff faces. And in the back is a differential male who acts as a babysitter and a guard, and turns out to be the leader male's nephew. There's some elder females, and these act as scouts, testing the food, testing seeds and berries to see if they're ripe. The males are flashing their rumps to each other like the same way that you might smile at a friend to say, hey, you're safe with me, and maybe we can work together. And if anyone in these troops is threatened, the whole troop will bark and mob the attacker. Now, when I watched these baboons, I'd be sitting on the ground and all kinds of ants would be biting me. And one day I thought, gosh, these baboons are a lot like these ants. They take on different roles, different jobs. And then I started thinking, well, that's a lot like people as well. In fact, I thought a Martian zoologist observing ants and people might wonder if we're somehow similar kinds of animals, given our apartment complexes and the way we walk on the streets of Manhattan together. And like us, some ants are farmers, growing fungal gardens underground. Some herd aphids and caterpillars, which they've even bred to be tame and wingless, domesticated animals. And they take on different jobs. Some ants work in the nursery, some are foragers, some are patrollers or soldiers, and some build the nest and maintain it. They share seamlessly, and this expands the colony's capacity as a whole. Everyone does better as a result. Well, I'd never heard anyone make that connection between ants and people. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Truly, we are eusocial superorganism species, the same way ants and honeybees and termites are. We do share 98% of our genetic material with chimpanzees, and we're only 5 million years separated from them, but we're fundamentally different. A bipedal chimp would starve if they sprained an ankle because nobody's gonna help that guy. We're not chimpanzees, we're polite and helpful, and we can even ride on an airplane with complete strangers without chewing each other's ears off, for the most part. So I had those realizations, but it's not really the kind of thing you can study in an academic institution. So I pursued entrepreneurship and found that very rewarding. But some years later, I returned to this idea. I tried to boil superorganism behavioral ecology down to its essence so decision makers could see where their organizations deviated from these deep patterns, where potential had been suppressed or overlooked, and start to unleash it. Members of a colony share a reproductive purpose, a territory, and a language of simple if-then rules. Individual members are diverse and freely work in teams doing different tasks. The colony feeds itself by gathering and processing dispersed nutrients, which are freely shared, and they cultivate these nutrients in a distributed way as community gardeners. And so in this way, they nurture and prune a reliable, adaptable, open-ended set of capabilities and resources from one generation to the next. We've all seen ants at work in the kitchen. If one comes across food, it lays down a pheromone scent trail that if another ant comes across it, it'll follow that too and lay down its own trail. So that scent starts to build, and pretty soon you have a line of ants carting away the food. And then when the food is gone, they stop laying down that trail and the scent dissipates, and they go search elsewhere. It's sort of like a game of chess. You know, I do this, you do that. They don't tell each other what to do. One action triggers another. So the whole colony works this way with these simple if-then rules, building to these trigger thresholds, to powerful patterns and outcomes. We might think of these colonies as clone armies, but that couldn't be further from the truth. A virgin female must mate with at least half a dozen males on her nuptial flight in order to have enough diversity to support the colony's functions. So ants are diverse, free, independent. Every individual has their own style, even personality. No two individuals are alike. But you might have noticed that our own lives don't follow this model very well. We don't share a purpose, we don't seamlessly share. We're competing for grades and later for salaries, and we're doing it in predefined categories. Why would we do this to ourselves? Why would we stunt and suppress our collective capacity by suppressing individual capabilities that way? Ants would never do that. This brings us to transition number 3, parasites. Superorganisms are plagued by parasites seeking to steal their food and labor. They may mimic the scent of their larvae or their favorite food, and then once they gain entry, devour the young or live for free. Some of these species are even slave raiders. They'll actually steal the larvae and take them and use them as their own labor. Some species can't even survive without these slaves. The parasite's aim is to feed their own offspring. And so they want to do it as efficiently as possible. They want replicability and replaceability. Diversity, autonomy, those are just nuisances, deviations from standard that have to be controlled. You might have heard about zombie ants, and this is a fungus that infects their brains and compels the ant to climb up a stalk of grass where it explodes in a rain of parasitic infectious spores onto their nestmates below. They really don't care about individual ants, and they certainly don't care about the territory the ants live in. They're not there to grow the colony's future for their descendants or the web of life that will support them in the future. They don't care about any of that. Economies of scale is what they're after. Does that sound familiar? Foundations of modern life and work are inherently parasitic, designed to extract our community wealth and labor. In fact, nearly all of us have ancestors whose commonwealth was stolen in this way. The Romans or the conquistadors or Genghis Khan, or the Dutch East India Company, or the British Empire. A force of invaders fueled by stolen grain stripped our ancestors of their wealth and their hard-earned expertise for living well. So it's no wonder we can't make the changes that we claim to want so badly. Wedico is a word that some Native American tribes use, a cannibalistic and contagious virus of the mind that prevents us from being generous and trusting. This concept is widespread among foraging people. The Australians speak of emu, the embodiment of runaway narcissism. We can't go at climate change or any of these other wicked problems with this parasitized mindset. Now, it may seem that this runaway greed is unstoppable. What can we actually do to stop that? We can learn a lot from the ants. They have proven methods for protecting and restoring colony health. The first and most important thing is to simply prevent their entry. You'll be interested to know that a lot of parasites will use propaganda pheromones designed to make the host soldiers go crazy in circles and distract them so that the parasitic queen can just nip right into the colony and sterilize the host queen and take over so that they serve her and her offspring, but instead by mistake. But if a parasite does get inside, these ants have ways of dealing with that. They even immunize each other, licking each other to dilute the virus and dilute its power. And notice that nobody's doing it to them. They do it for each other. Their shared purpose, the future of their offspring, is paramount. Meanwhile, the queen and her offspring are safe below in their nest. This Wedico is triggered by trauma. Hurt people hurt people. This is actually good news because it means that Wedico, the illness, is carried within our hearts and that we have the power to heal, guard each other's autonomy and freedom, prune dominant habits, to increase diversity, diverse opportunity, cultivate each other's unique talents for the colony's collective success. This is the piece that we completely drop off. The power our organizations have neglected and, in fact, even suppressed comes from our shared purpose, the health and opportunity that our children's children will have, and the web of diverse life and healthy ecosystems that will support them. This is the source of the potential that we've neglected. Protecting and growing our commonwealth, our shared purpose. This is transition 4. I emigrated from the UK with my parents when I was just 2 years old, and we drove in a little Volkswagen Bug from Canada down to San Diego. And every time we passed an Arco gas station, we would stop and get a free pair of these little plastic African animals that I would, march 2 by 2 into my little plastic ark. Yes, it was a fossil fuel company that set me on my path. And by the time we arrived in San Diego, I knew everything there was to know about these animals and their lives. But it didn't teach me anything about their lives in Africa. And similarly, it didn't teach me anything about my own context. They were as severed from their environment as I was. My first journey into VR, virtual reality, for a client, I put on the headset and I was amused to notice that there was no ground. It was just a floating grid. And I comment on that. And it turns out leaders don't really like that when you point that out, because place seems irrelevant to them. It seems provincial and small. I mean, they want to scale. But of course, we're living things, and we depend on our places to eat and to shelter ourselves and to create conditions conducive to life for our descendants. Place is essential. So this is transition 4. Know your nature of place. Native species and indigenous people, they have proven ways of thriving in place. Acquired over millions of years or thousands of generations. But most of us are severed from that. We're severed from our ancestral knowledge, our connection to place, and the wisdom that our ancestors had for living well there. We just lost it. For most of us, creatures are teeming away in the bushes there, and that's how we like it. But in college, I was backpacking the Hawaiian backcountry because I was studying island biogeography. And what I realized was that every species there, their ancestors had flown there or floated there, and they'd come as an invader, a foreign invader at some point. But over time, they'd actually transformed. They'd formed relationships with other species, symbioses, and they'd come to belong. So how did that happen? What is that process of naturalizing to place? And that's transition number 5, what I call living design. So my dad was an architect, and ironically enough, he specialized in zoos and aquaria, and later on, army barracks and college dorms. He loved unpretentious design that, disappeared into its surroundings, like sheds. So the goal of these designs was to support the inhabitants so well that the enclosures seemed to disappear. Maybe they were the last of their kind. If they could continue on, someday those habitats might be restored and they could return. That seemed like a magical possibility to me as a child, and something worth doing. He thought of good design the same way spiders spin webs or birds weave their nests. It was something to soften the challenges of environment so that you could belong, so you could be part of it. And we needed the same things they did: food and shelter, a good mate, opportunities, and the freedom to pursue them. And that brings me to the final transition, what I call living design. What would it look like to live our true nature as human superorganisms and to grow conditions conducive to life for our descendants and the web of life that will support them in the future. What would that look like? The future presents us with some really wicked problems. We don't know what the future will bring, but all these problems have already been solved for us, and all we need to do is look. So I hope this trail map has stirred up some deep insights for you. Maybe you have questions, or maybe you're ready for a teeming transformation of your own. And I'm here to serve as your trail guide. I want to invite you to book a personal assessment with me. We'll go through the trail map together and look for ways that you can put these insights to work for your organization or your community or your life right away. You'll get a recording of our time together plus my specific recommendations to unleash potential and scale nature's way. You can book that session right here in the link, and I can't wait to talk with you and see how teeming can help your organization right away.